Hello and welcome to the Deathsquad Chronicles. This is an audio storytelling podcast written and created by Zach Caffrey-Kerr. The first story I'm going to read to you because no one likes reading anymore, so I figure I'll do it for you because why not? I've got nothing else better to do. The first story is called Merry Bloodsucking Christmas. It's pretty kind of self-explanatory in the title. It's about vampires and it's about the Deathsquad Motorcycle Club, which is a club that like to hunt monsters and to say some funny stuff while they do it. So I hope you enjoy. Remember, it's probably not safe for work. It's quite graphic and rude, so if you don't like that stuff, I suggest you go find another audio story podcast where someone will read you a book that involves pretty things and stuff like that. Alright, let's get into it. I hope you're sitting down and have your listening ears on, as I used to say in primary school. This is story time with Zach Caffrey-Kerr. I feel like I should be playing some play school music right now. If you're from Australia, I don't know if they have it in America, but enjoy the podcast. It never snowed in Florida, not even on Christmas, which made the day feel like a cheap knockoff compared to what you saw in the movies. Barry always wore a Hawaiian shirt to combat the oppressive heat, breathable and perfectly fashionable in every era. A late afternoon breeze came, drying the sweat forming beneath his armpits. It was Christmas Eve, and he was already half a bottle of rum into the day, a leftover from the previous day. Barry never used to drink so much. He had once been a trim-cut 30-year-old, one with a family and an excellent job. But it had been a rough year, and life had a way of knocking you to the gutter just when you thought you were singing in the rain. Now Barry was a stereotypical balding used car salesman, with a nice beer belly starting to form. He hadn't sold a car in over a month, but what really got him down was that he hadn't seen his baby since Lisa had left last Christmas. She had moved to Chicago at the start of the year, taking everything with her. It seemed she hated him now, and was probably happy that he was doing this to himself. But he missed his baby, the way she fit into his arms. It felt like he went from one stereotype to another, but Barry hated that he barely felt the transition. It seemed to him that life always started out great, and then the world beat down on you as mercilessly as the Florida sun and ruined it, like fallen frangipanis wilting in the heat. He was going to get another bottle of rum and take it back to his place to sulk in solitude. Then he walked past a Peking duck bar and bistro and decided that it was Christmas Eve and maybe sulking in company was the right thing to do. It was an Asian themed bar, and Barry wondered how much longer it would be in business. These sort of themed places never lasted long in Florida. He took a seat and scanned the room. The place was a third full of people, most just like him, broken loners trying to fill gaps in their lives with liquor and cheap cigarettes, attempting to chase down some kind of Christmas joy. The young bartender, who looked like he would rather be anywhere in the world but here slinging drinks, asked what he was having. Sailor Jerry and Diet Coke, Barry answered. He was worried about the calories, not so much his drinking habit. You here alone? The bartender asked as he was mixing his drink. Yep, unless you count the buzz. Huh, Barry replied, giggling a little. What? No family to go home to? Barry hated when people didn't leave him alone. Asked him all the questions he didn't want to answer. Nope, they left, Barry said shortly. The spoils of being a loser, he added, the sarcasm bleeding into his voice. The bartender slid over his drink. I get it. Touchy subject. Well, enjoy your evening. Barry took a sip and nodded to the bartender. Well, fuck you, bitch, he heard from behind him, and turned to watch domestic drama unfold. There stood a tall, heavily tattooed man with an undercut yelling at someone who was no doubt his girlfriend. A beautiful brunette with shoulder-length hair and what Barry imagined a great smile, though he doubted he would see it tonight. She grabbed the drink that sat on the counter beside her and threw it at the man's face. Asshole, she said, and stomped out the back exit. Where the fuck do you think you're going? The beefcake said, as he followed her out. Trouble in paradise, Barry said to himself, taking another sip of his drink before dipping into his pocket for a cigarette pack and lighting up. The pain in the back of his throat as the smoke filled his lungs was exquisite. He took another gulp of his drink before exhaling. Smoke and a strong drink were the best combination, almost better than sex. He took a couple more drags before deciding it was time to drain the main vein. He got up from his stool, his legs wobbly and the room spinning slightly. Maybe the rum had been a little stronger than he anticipated, but he loved that feeling of just being slightly out of control. What was the point of drinking otherwise? Opening the doors to the men's bathroom, reality fully detached from herself, and he couldn't figure out if there were 2 stalls or 11. Barry took a couple more steps, wobbling and swaying. Then he fell, cracking his head on the lino floor. His vision blurred, and he struggled and failed to keep his eyes open. Just before they closed, he caught a sight of a pair of well-made leather shoes. "Perfect," the stranger said. End of paragraph. The world came back to Barry in a blurry mess. Normally, he would find himself on the floor of his 1-bedroom apartment, splayed out next to empty bottles or a half-smoked cigarette. This room looked different, at least in the shapes he could make out as the room spun around him. He realised now he was in a chair, and only when he tried to get up and make sense of his surroundings did he realise he was bound to it. His heart began to beat harder as he struggled against the rope, the adrenaline surging through his veins, sobering him up quickly. The room became more stable, and he noticed he wasn't alone. He was in the dining area of a lavish and modern apartment, and in the lounge room to his right were a group of wealthy-looking people, laughing and engaged in animated chit-chat. To his left was another person tied to a chair, brutish-looking, with tattoos covering most of his heavily muscled body. It took Barry a moment to realise where he recognised him. It was the same man who'd been arguing with his girlfriend at the bar, only now he was unconscious, sleeping with his head resting on his shoulder. Barry struggled with his bonds a little more, but to no avail. However, it did succeed in getting the attention of the people in the next room. "Well, it looks like our main course has just woken up," said one of them as he meandered into the room in which Barry was held. He was a short man and wore a business suit with no tie. His neat hair looked freshly cut, the only appealing thing about him, as he was an ugly-looking person with crooked teeth and something about his proportions that seemed somehow off. He was followed by another man and a woman, both of whom had an upper-class look to them, and appeared as though they never had to worry about not looking beautiful in their lives. They looked in their early 30s, though the man was starting to grey a little around the sides. The rest of the party remained in the lounge area, all enjoying glasses of red wine. Even so, their attention was turned to Barry. Where am I? Why am I tied up?" Barry asked furiously. The ugly man spoke up. "Well, aren't you a fiery one? Not to worry, you're in my apartment and the rope is so you won't get away. Why else? Oh, of course, where are my manners? I'm Nigel." He stuck out his hand for Barry to shake and then removed it, grinning. "I'm sorry, I see you're a little tied up at the moment." What am I doing here? Is this an intervention?" Barry asked. Nigel laughed. "No one cares about you enough to try something like that. You're here because it's Christmas, and I promised my friends a feast. One they paid top dollar for, I might add." "Wait, it's Christmas? How long have I been asleep?" Barry was confused and 100% sober, but desperately wishing he wasn't. "Oh, about 24 hours. Long enough for the tranquilizers and the alcohol to burn out of your system. They tend to leave a real chemical taste, like a gas station meal, not a home-cooked one," Nigel replied smoothly. "The fuck are you talking about? Untie me now," Barry ordered, trying not to let his voice shake. "Oh, Nigel, he's getting scared. How tasty. Can we start eating already? I'm starving," the woman asked excitedly. Nigel put his index finger to his mouth. "Shh," he said, looking at her. Then he turned back to Barry. "Don't you just hate being interrupted?" He leaned closer to Barry and began to sniff him, and Barry could smell his expensive cologne as the man moved around him in a tight circle. "You do smell about done to me," Nigel whispered in his ear. Barry struggled futilely with his bonds again as sweat broke out over his body. "Get the fuck off me, you fucking creep!" he yelled. At an unnatural speed, Nigel moved back and stared at him, but his face had changed. It was already ugly, but now it was grotesque. His skin had become leathery, and his nose had flattened to join with his upper lip to form a permanent snarl, showing rows of small pointed teeth. His eyebrows protruded and curved down around his set back eyes, which had become smaller and black like a small mammal, the whites barely showing. His ears were enlarged and extended outward to points, small hairs growing on them in a wild coat. His previously neat head of hair had become wild and unruly. He stared at Barry with his tiny black eyes, and Barry's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. He heard Nigel mutter, "Perfect," before lunging towards Barry's neck. "Hey, fucko! I wouldn't do that if I were you." The voice came from Barry's left. Nigel stopped dead in his tracks, and everyone turned their heads to stare at the tattooed man, who was sitting up and wide awake. "Jesus! Anyone ever tell you you look exactly like Keith Richards?" he said with a cheeky grin. Nigel stood up straight, his face morphing back to normal. "Fuck me, you looked better before, man-bat," the man said, laughing to himself. Nigel's expressions changed from stunned to furious. "So, we got a talker over here, do we? Maybe you'll be the first course." "Hey, it's your wealth, ugly. But first, can any of your better looking friends tell me where my girlfriend is? I don't see her around here." The man looked around in his chair. "You got a smart mouth for someone tied to a chair. Didn't your mother teach you any manners?" Nigel asked, moving now to stand in front of him. "Nope, she died when I was a kid. Look, it's a real sad story and I wouldn't want to bring this party down and anything, but speaking to mothers, you have a face only one could love. I mean, I know all you vamps have all the money now, but you must be shelling out some real moolah to have friends this good looking," the tattooed man replied with a smile. Nigel worked his mouth, seemingly unable to find an adequate response. "But I think I know why they're really here, and it isn't because of your charming personality there, Quasimodo," the man continued. "And I'll ask again, and I gotta say, I hate repeating myself. Where the fuck is my girlfriend?" His tone was impatient now. Nigel growled furiously, his guests looking startled by what was coming out of their victim's mouth. He grabbed the tattoo man by the throat, all but lifting him in the chair from the ground. "How dare you speak to me like that, you bag of blood? And how do you know what I am? Who do you work for? The Pixies or the Wolves?" Nigel demanded. "Fuck you!" the man struggling to escape from Nigel's grip. A long moment went by as Nigel stared, trying to intimidate the man, but his captain's bravado prevailed, and Nigel was eventually forced to drop him, releasing his grip from the man's neck. "You know what? I don't care," Nigel scoffed. "Those other monsters aren't on our level, and they'll always be gutter trash. Plus, I'm hungry. I was going to start with the good man over here," he gestured towards Barry. "But I think I'll start with your smart fucking mouth. First though, I'm going to season the meal. Nancy, will you go get dessert?" Nigel said, and the woman standing next to him left the room. Over in the lounge, Barry could see the other guests were starting to get impatient. "Will you stop playing with the food? I'm getting hungry over here," one of them whined. "Terrence, if I told you once, I've told you 1,000 fucking times, this is my dinner party and we'll eat when I say we fucking eat," Nigel screamed back. "Ooh, watch out, no one likes a bossy host, and you don't have a lot going for you there, fugly," the tattoo man jumped in. Again, Nigel backhanded him, the sound like a whip crack, and a little blood started to form on the side of his mouth. "Will you shut your fucking mouth?" The tattoo man stuck out his tongue and tasting the blood. "Oh, you bet your ugly ass you're gonna pay for that, you filthy bloodsucker." Before Nigel could respond, the woman came back to the room, pushing a wheelchair that held the beautiful brunette from the bar. She too was tied up, but seemed oddly calm given the situation she was in. "Brody, there you are. You still feeling that magic, baby?" the tattoo man asked. "I'm always feeling that magic, Seth, but I'm pissed now. Do you know it's Christmas? You said this would only take a couple of hours, so can we hurry this up?" She scowled, aggravated. "Yeah, my bad. I didn't think it would take this long. They got some good drugs up in here," Seth said, looking back at Nigel. Will you two shut up? You're not the ones in control here, Nigel said, striding up to Brody in the wheelchair. Barry said nothing, more confused than ever and just as scared. Let me tell you what's going to happen now, smartass, Nigel continued, moving over to Brody, not sparing Barry a look. I'm going to drain this beautiful young lady of some of her blood, and then all my friends are going to have a taste until her pulse is gone. Then, once you've suffered enough, we're going to eat you. Nigel caressed Brody's neck, who looked frankly bored by it all. Really? Wow. When are you guys going to come up with something original? The whole suave vampire thing. I'm going to drain your blood and all the love from your body. Bullshit. I mean, if I were you guys, I would have gone a lot more with the Lost Boys and a little less Wolf of Wall Street. These things have centuries, and this is the best you can come up with? Seth said, and he seemed just as unconcerned as his girlfriend. Barry had enough of this craziness. Will someone please tell me what the fuck is going on? He screamed at the group. Oh shit, sorry buddy, I forgot you were there. I'll explain, Seth said calmly. Will somebody shut him up? Cut out his tongue or something, Nigel ordered, and the grey-haired man started to move towards Seth. Hey, just give me a second. Somebody should at least explain the situation to him, Seth said, and the man stopped and looked at Nigel, who nodded in agreement. Okay then, Food, what's the situation? Nigel asked. Well, Seth said, adjusting himself in his seat and looking back over at Barry. You, my friend, have found yourself at a vampire dinner party, and you're the main course, or the starter, or well, I don't know how these things normally play out, because this is actually my first one. And this kind of thing is very much frowned upon in their community, because when vamps start going after normal people, it draws a lot of attention. You know, stakes, angry posses, and all that. And I'm guessing that fugly superior over here doesn't know he's hosting them, judging by his sloppiness and leaving bodies out on the street. Like, how many murder-suicides of jaded lovers and transients did you think we'd have to find before we'd come after you? I mean, fuck, you make me want to hunt demons, and I fucking hate that shit. And who are you exactly? Nigel looked like he was about to combust. Oh, me? I'm the guy that's gonna kill you, Seth replied. Fucking hell, Barry said to himself. Really? Nigel was unimpressed. Francis, cut out his tongue, I've had enough, he ordered, and the grey-haired man moved again, flicking out a knife from his pocket and grabbing Seth by the jaw. Hey, wait on a second. Why didn't you lift my shirt up there, buddy? Seth said. Francis looked at Nigel for permission, who nodded. Letting go of his grip around Seth's jaw, he lifted up his shirt, and his eyes widened in horror. Oh fuck, what the fuck did you bring here, you fucking idiot? Francis' voice was heavily accented with what sounded like a Russian accent. Nigel looked at him, confused, and swiftly moved over to Seth. We need to get the fuck out of here! Francis turned to proclaim to the rest of the group, who were confused by his sudden change in demeanour. Nigel looked down at Seth, and Barry saw it too. The large tattoo across his stomach. Deathsquad, it read, and Nigel paled. Yeah, that's right, Fugly. You fucked up, Seth proclaimed, and just as he finished speaking, the sound of motorbike engines started screaming in the background like war horns. Now, let me explain your situation. You tried to make some friends and influence people by hosting these little parties and spilling the blood of perfectly innocent bystanders, but you weren't even good at that. So I'm guessing failure is sort of a theme in your life, and now you've drawn the attention of me and my club. And we're gonna kill you and everyone else here, Seth said as his eyes glittered. No, Nigel said, backing up. Oh, you can't run. We already have you surrounded, Seth added calmly, just as a round of silver smashed through the window. It made contact with one of the beautiful ladies sitting on the couch in the lounge, leaving only a stump where her head had been. Then, before Barry's eyes, her body dissolved into a pool of swirling black and red blood. Barry tried to duck out of the way as he heard more shots, some narrowly missing the other vampires as they attempted to flee. Brody, now! He heard Seth yell, and his mind frantically tried to make sense of the activity exploding around him. When he looked up, Brody's eyes began to glow purple, and a lavender-coloured smoke was starting to rise from them. Seth, she mumbled. and the rope that tied each of them to the chairs had turned into snakes, unravelling themselves and slithering away. Barry shivered as he felt one of them squirm over his skin. Seth got up from his chair, moving fast and grabbing Nigel by the neck, lifting him up into the air with the feat of strength that had Barry's eyes popping out of his head. "Nigel, woo," muttered Brody next to him, and her eyes glowed again as the wooden legs of the chair that Seth had been sitting on started to come alive. It began to grow branches, and these turned gradually into thick vines as Barry sat there, not knowing what to do, convinced once again that he was dreaming. The vines grew and grew, and from behind Nigel's back they formed a thick, stake-like stump. "Told you I'd be the guy that killed you, fugly," Seth said, still gripping the vampire by the neck, slammed him into the stump, piercing him through the heart. After a moment, Nigel's body dissolved into the same red and black blood cocktail Barry had witnessed earlier. Barry gaped and made a noise from somewhere in his throat. Seth turned and faced him. "Oh shit, you're still here?" he said with a grin. Brody put a comforting hand around Barry's shoulder. "Don't worry, honey, you're safe now." Barry freaked and ran into the lounge. He slipped on a pool of blood and fell, covering himself in it. "Casuals," he heard Seth say to Brody with a disapproving grunt. He scrambled to his knees and watched as the rest of the vampires stampeded to the front door before it exploded open in an eruption of flame, hard enough to throw them all onto their backs. Two men walked through the doorway. They were both tall and wore the same kind of leather vest that Barry recognised as an outlaw motorcycle club's attire. He had seen it around Florida from time to time. The insignia on their back was a lion skull on top of a cross, with Deathsquad written across the shoulders. That was where the similarities ended. One of them was a large black man that sported a crew cut and had a goatee. The largest man Barry had ever seen in his life. His face had 3 parallel scars across his left eye. He was holding the crossbow and he immediately shot one of the vampires as it tried to get up. The second man was white and not nearly as tall, but still had an intimidating stature. Though his face looked young, his body told a different story. His skin completely covered in scars that looked like burn marks and wound around his limbs like tribal tattoos. He wore an eye patch over his right eye and a surgical mask over his mouth. For all that, Barry saw that he might have been good looking once, with his comb black hair and one mesmerising blue eye, the colour of a clear ocean like on a postcard. It wasn't just this man's appearance that was strange. His hands also appeared to be on fire, although the flames didn't seem to burn the gloves he was wearing. They seemed almost like part of him. The man with the covered face torched 3 vampires trying to crawl away. Caught directly in the inferno, they screamed in agony before disappearing altogether. Barry couldn't believe what he was seeing. His brain reeled as he tried to comprehend it all. What the fuck? His eyes rolled into the back of his head. End of paragraph. "Hey bro, wake up!" Someone's palm slapped him across the face, stunned him back into awareness. Barry was outside now, hidden away in some side streets by the looks of it. He shivered. "You alright, buddy?" Seth asked. Now he's wearing the same leather vest as the other men around him. Barry stared, seeing a couple more grisly looking men standing next to their bikes. The large black man emerged from the group, the masked one by his side approaching him. "What happened?" Barry asked. "Was that real?" "Oh yeah, buddy, you had one wild night," Seth replied with a friendly smile. "It must be your lucky day. If they'd gotten you a couple weeks earlier, you'd be dinner by now." "I'm Brad Bow, by the way. Nice to meet you." The large black man offered his hand. Barry shook it, and Brad's grip was terrifying. He pulled Barry up to his feet with ease. I'm Barry. Barry Quinn." His voice shook. "I feel like I should be thanking you, but what the fuck was that?" "It's alright. You probably have 1,000 questions. Most do when they see the real world beyond the fairy tales. But let me give you the short version. You were captured by a rebel sect of vampires, and we came and killed them. Normally, they stick to goat's blood and eat people who give themselves over freely for whatever reason. They, like most monsters, know we'll come and put boots on them otherwise," Barry replied. "But vampires, they're real?" "Yep, real and as horrible as losing your virginity. And they're real Wall Street guys. Worst type of criminals, Seth said with a laugh. Barry shook his head. So what about everything else? Don't tell me Santa's real too. Yep, most things are, except for ghosts. They were made up by producers to sell horror movies, Brad replied. And Santa was, until he started getting a little too hands-on with the kids, and we had to put an end to that one, Seth added. And who are you guys exactly? Some type of monster slayers? Because you look like a bunch of bikers to me, Barry asked hesitantly. Yes, we are. And that's what we want everyone else to think too. Makes the job easy when all hell is raised and they think a bunch of dirty bikers did it. Plus, the structure works for us. But our mission has been around a lot longer than the biker gangs, Brad replied. Barry shook his head again. That really is crazy, he murmured, still unsure if he was ready to believe it. Yeah, that's what most people say. Barry looked over to the masked man who spoke. And what is he? I saw him shoot flames out of his hands, Barry asked, pointing at him. And her? I saw her do things that weren't possible at all, he added, pointing at Brody who stood by Seth's bike. Seth laughed. That's Brody. She's my girl. She's also a witch. A pretty wicked one too, he said, looking over at Brody, who responded by flipping him the bird. Brad grabbed the masked man around the shoulder like they're old friends. And this is my boy, Jack Bone. And well, we don't know what the hell he is, but I know he's special, Brad said. Geez, thanks, Unc, Jack replied, playfully pushing him off. And so is the one with the smart mouth. He's my nephew, Brad said. But you're black. And? Brad replied. Yeah, that's racist, Seth added. Look, to explain it shortly, our grandma got a little too into the free love in the 60s and my mum and him looked a lot different. And after my mother died, my uncle adopted me. And we found Jack at the Munsters' house, so we decided to adopt him too, Seth finished. Fuck you, Seth, Jack shot back. Boys, Brad interrupted, his voice authoritative, and they both fell silently into line. Clearly Brad knew exactly when to nip it in the butt before the real argument started. Well, anyway, he turned to Barry. We really have to get going, and don't worry about the cops or anything, we have a relationship. A mate's gonna go up there and find a mess, and then they're gonna put a file in some dusty room that no one really gives a shit about. But it was nice meeting you, Brad said, offering up a handshake. Okay, well, thank you for saving my life, Barry said, shaking his hand, unsure what else he was supposed to say. Seth offered out his hand next. Yeah, let's never do this again, he said, grinning. Agreed. Oh, and if there's anything in the world you guys need, I sell used cars. It's not much, but if there's anything, I'm your guy. I feel like I owe you guys my life, Barry said, shaking Jack's gloved hand next. You know what? I might just call in that favour one day. In the meantime, you look after yourself, Barry Quinn, Brad said. He hopped on his Harley and it roared to life. With that, the gang sped off like they never heard of speed limits, leaving Barry alone in the alley. It was at that moment Barry knew he wasn't going to take another sip of alcohol as long as he lived. He pulled a photo out of his wallet, slightly stained with black blood. He looked at it, but the same old feeling he was used to didn't come as he stared down at his ex-wife and a lovely golden retriever, his baby. But that life was over, he realised, and now he was just holding on to memories that would never come back, no matter how hard he hoped. He crumpled up the photo and threw it away. I need to get a new dog, he muttered to himself, walking back into a world that was a little scarier now. He knew he wouldn't be able to sleep for weeks, but somehow, he was okay with that too. The end. Okay, that was the first chronicle in the Deathsquad Chronicles. I hope everyone enjoyed that. Some of them are a bit longer. I've got like 7 of them written and like a whole book, so there's plenty of stuff to come out eventually, but it will. So if you like this, please subscribe to wherever you're listening to this on. Like the channel, because I'm going to put up on YouTube too. Also, you can follow the Instagram account at Deathsquad Chronicles and Facebook page, also at Deathsquad Chronicles. Or you can come to the website if you're feeling very generous and donate, because this shit costs money to put out, as I'm realising now, and it'd be good to actually make money at something that you like doing. But anyway, this is Zach Africa. I hope you all enjoyed, and come back next time for the next adventure in the Deathsquad Chronicles.